Welcome to the Hop Edition podcast, brought to you in association with the Malt Miller, your go-to choice for premium homebrewing ingredients and equipment. Whether you're a beginner starting out or an experienced brewer, the Malt Miller has got you covered. So for top quality products and customer service, jump over to themaltmiller.co.uk and tell them the Hop Edition sent you. We would also like to thank all our Patreons for their continued support with running and developing the pod. If you would like to become a member and gain access to exclusive perks and benefits, head over to patreon.com/the Hop Edition. Now it's time to get this pod started, so crack open a homebrew and enjoy the episode. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 132 of the Hop Edition podcast. Tonight we are going to be discussing how to choose and blend hops for specific flavour outcomes. We're going to approach this from a sort of starting point for some of you who may not be as experienced with different hop varieties, and moving on to looking at slightly more analytical and perhaps even scientific ways to approach it, and even talking about new tools that are available to us nowadays, like AI, that can help you by basically, pulling all that sort of data that's out there together to give you an idea of what flavors you might get from different combinations and so on. And just some general tips on how to go about sort of emphasizing particular flavors in terms of how flavor perception and so on work. So hopefully there might be some interesting stuff in there. I know it's been interesting for us even just looking at the research for this, so hopefully we'll get some of that across to you guys as well. But before we get into all of that, as usual, we'd like to thank our partner sponsor, the Malt Miller. Especially if you're looking for hops, they are your premier supplier of all things homebrew. While you're over there, don't forget to check out the dedicated Hop Edition recipe section, where you can find a range of beers that are featured on the podcast, including some of our own personal creations and some absolute stunners from various guests that we've had over the episodes. So with a hop-focused episode, it would be remiss of us not to point out that the Malt Miller have recently permanently reduced the pricing on all of their hop pellets, so you can get good value hops over there full time now. So that's the intro done. You might have noticed that we're minus one Scotsman this evening, so it's just me and Owen doing it tonight. So for our non-UK listeners, you won't need the subtitles on this one necessarily. Not that Andy's that difficult to understand, and unless he's had a few pints too many, but
Which is every episode.
every episode, yeah. So how you doing, Owen? You good?
I'm all right, mate. Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad it is Friday. It's been a long week, but I can't believe January is nearly up. So
Indeed.
I'm looking forward to sinking a couple of beers and chatting with you for the evening.
Awesome. Yes, January. It's a long old month, isn't it? So glad that we are getting towards the end of it.
But mine's just blazing by. Work.
Really?
It hasn't been any easing at work. It's been straight.
Oh no, I hear you.
Running.
I hear you on that one for sure.
Yeah,
but
so it's been good, but just pretty relentless.
Yeah. Likewise, need a couple of beers tonight just to relax a little bit. So on that note, what have you got in the glass?
I have got a beer from a Patreon, one of our listeners, Lewis Waddy, who over the Christmas period, on the run up to Christmas, we actually did a Secret Santa with the whole Patreon group. And I got Lewis as my Santa, and he sent me some East Coast IPAs and some West Coast IPAs. And
Nice.
I'm drinking the West Coast IPA tonight, which is 6.9%. So there's no easing in tonight. A bit like my January. 66 IBUs. And I have to say, Lewis, the aroma on this is absolutely cracking. I was saying to Tricky, it smells like a duck. It looks like a duck. I'm pretty certain it quacks. And it's a pretty legit West Coast IPA /duck.
ticking all the boxes then on that front. Yeah?
Mate, it's got great malt presence. It's got a nice sweetness to it, well balanced in the IBUs, amazing hop presence, really good brewing. Cheers, Lewis.
Sweet.
Cheers, mate.
On the topic of hop combinations, I know you said you didn't want to guess. I'm gonna push you for this one, Owen. What do you think? We've got Lewis in the chat, so we can confirm
if
he's anywhere close.
I reckon there's. I'm gonna guess it's Citra Mosaic or at least Mosaic, but I think there might be something else in there.
He's going with safe options.
I reckon it might be Galaxy, maybe Simcoe. Yeah, I'm gonna embarrass myself now. I think Lewis, get in the comments and tell me.
Yeah, let us know,
tell
Lewis,
me how wrong I am.
if you're still in here. So yeah, while we wait for some feedback on that, I've got where's my camera gone? There it is. I've got what is called Vacant Revolution. So this is a Vacant Gesture recipe with Revolution blend subbed in for all the Mosaic. And it's very nice. It's just a super smashable session beer, 3.8%. Kind of comes out like a sort of golden ale / extra pale ale with just loads of nice, crisp, dry kind of New Zealand hop flavour from the Revolution blend, mostly Nelson, but there's a bunch of other stuff in there as well. We're going to talk about blends in a little bit, but it's my absolute favourite at the moment anyway, hop blend. And I really hope somebody starts like stocking it properly, because it's not so easy to get hold of. But
have they not stopped producing it now though?
Well, there was a rumor going around that they'd stopped producing it, but then people were saying that it wasn't that blend that they'd stopped making. It was another one. Might have been Turkey's Pick that they were saying that was going to go. You know, it's all on their website still, so it doesn't. You know, there's not. I can't find any obvious information to confirm that it's been stopped or not. But it would seem crazy to me that they would stop it, because I can't see how anyone would try that blend and not be like, wow, I want to buy more of that.
Yeah,
because I mean, you've used it, and everyone else that's used it has said that it's amazing, and it's one of the best smelling, like out the bag sort of hot combos that I've ever known.
It smells like actual fruit salad sweets.
100%. Yeah, it's amazing.
It smells wickedly good. Yeah, I think I've still got quite a bit of it left actually in the freezer, so I think I'm okay for the minute. But it would be good to be able to find a source for that.
Yeah, because there was a group buy that our good friend Brett helped out with via, I believe, somebody who was purchasing them off of Brewers Select, but they've got it on the website, but they don't have any in stock currently. So yeah, fingers crossed, some more of that will come back. But anyway, so yeah, that's what I'm drinking. That won't last long in the glass. It's very nice. We're talking about hop combinations tonight, and we have actually talked about hops before, and as part of that episode we did do a little bit on hop combos and kind of like which ones worked well and which ones are our favourites and all that sort of thing. That was quite a while ago though, and we felt like we sort of could definitely dig into that a little bit more in terms of how you go about looking at hop combinations and which ones will work well together, and what you can base those kind of decisions on. And also, as we alluded to in the intro, there's some new technology out there nowadays that can actually be really helpful in terms of trying to work out what you might get from particular combinations. So we won't launch straight into that the sort of technology side of it just yet, because we did want to start off a little bit more from kind of base principles in terms of, like, for the people who maybe are not quite as experienced brewers and they might not be familiar with a lot of the kind of names that we might come out with here, because we're probably going to cover several dozen different hop varieties here and be assuming that everyone knows what we're blabbering on about. But for maybe people who are not at that level of experience with their brewing, what would you say is a good starting point, Owen, for them as far as just becoming familiar with hop varieties generally?
I mean, that's a tricky one, right? Because I think it very much depends on the sort of style of beer that you like and therefore you're aiming to brew. But let's just assume kind of middle of the road craft. It's going to be predominantly your mainstream US hops.
Hmm.
And I think actually when you look at kind of hops that are grown by acreage in America, you're obviously gonna need to familiarise yourself with Citra, Mosaic, Simcoe, Amarillo, Cascade, Centennial. Um, there's there's probably at least another 4 or 5 that you're gonna want to get familiar with. Then you've got obviously your New Zealand hops, so Motueka, Nelson, probably the two predominant ones. But then, of course, I think it's worth getting pretty familiar with some of the classic UK hops, such as your Fuggles and your East Kent Goldings, for
Right.
example, two pretty good starting points. And then also, I think German or lager varieties, such as your Mittelfreus and your SARS. It's quite a long list, isn't it?
Yes.
But
So
okay, for us to
where?
shrink that down,
Yeah.
Citra, Mosaic, Nelson, SARS, Pearl,
Okay.
5.
Where do you think that it's worthwhile for people to be doing things like smash brewing to get familiar with those hops?
I think absolutely. Like I think that makes so much sense before you even get into the concept of blending. Do some single hop beers. And I think there's a bit of a myth actually that home brewers have, or certainly earlier on in your brewing, where you're going to be thinking, more hop combinations is going to result in a better outcome.
Hmm.
And in reality is if you don't blend them in the right way or use too many, you can actually just end up with a very muddy,
Yeah, 100%.
awful outcome, right? But actually, you can make some single hop beers that have. I wouldn't go as far as say as much complexity, but still have depth. Like if I think about some of the greatest beers I've probably drunk, have been single hop beers. So like
Yeah.
from memory, Verdant did an amazing single hop Nelson beer. I think it was a single hop Nelson beer.
Oh,
They've done
are you thinking of the like double IPA with the like
yes
samurai
with the samurai
type thing on the front of it?
Yeah, and the name escapes me now.
I can't believe I've forgotten the name of that because we raved about that beer for ages.
It is amazing. I need to get some more of that. They did an amazing single hop Mosaic beer. I think if you
One
get
more
a chance,
PSI, is that?
one more
the
PSI, I think
yeah.
it was called. That was absolutely incredible.
Actually, the Verdant also have the Citra one, which is the sidecar something.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
I
was
know
a
the one. It's
really.
yellow can, isn't it?
Yeah,
Is it in a yellow can?
it is.
Yeah. So Verdant makes some amazing single hop beers. Also, if you ever get the chance to try Fort Point by Trillium, that's an all Citra beer, and that's incredible as well.
Hmm.
So I think certain hops like are able to carry themselves
Yeah.
very well.
I think you could look at some like really classic styles on that front as well. Like, I mean, a lot of Czech pilsners, including stuff like Kel, is basically going to be a smash beer. It's all stars, probably, and a high quality pils malt, and
Yeah.
nobody's complaining about the lack of depth of hop flavor and complexity and those sorts of beers, are they? Just like it's just a fucking amazing beer. So 100%, yeah. And yeah, that's not to say that if some hops are not necessarily going to really dazzle you when you brew with them on their own. I'm sure we've all done a few sort of smash beers where we had high hopes and it was kind of like, yeah, it's all right, but it's not. I wish I'd sort of thrown in a little bit of Citra or something just to like lift it, perhaps. But even that's useful as a learning experience because you go, okay, well, yeah, that hop's really nice, but it's not quite the that bit hop that's going to carry an IPA or something like that on its own. necessarily that well, unless or you might say, well, maybe it can, but I need to like double the hopping rate with it or something like that. So, I've certainly had that experience when it comes to certain American hops. Things like an Azacca or an Eldorado, where I've gone, yeah, it's lovely hop flavor, but it's not got the intensity or the punch of a Citra or Mosaic. So, yeah, maybe you could go single hop with it, but you might want to be like really pushing the hopping rate to get that sort of flavor intensity out of it. I don't know.
Or thinking about the style that you're brewing, right?
Yeah.
If you want something intensely hoppy, then maybe, if you're going to do a single hop Nipa, for instance, maybe that's probably not going to work out as well as you might with Citra, for example.
Yeah.
But it would work really well in a Golden Ale or, maybe just a American Pale Ale.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I get you. I think, I mean, I don't, on reflection, I'm not sure how helpful that probably would have been for people that are very new to brewing. But I think the takeaway there is grab a handful of the more well-recognised hops.
Yeah.
And have a go at them in single hop beers.
And search out those commercial beers where it's clear that it is a single hop variety.
Do some research.
Find out where you can try beers that it's like, this is going to tell me exactly what that hop is all about. With the caveat that, bearing in mind, Verdant are probably throwing an absolutely outrageous like hopping rate at them that you're probably not going to really want to, particularly as a newer brewer, necessarily recreate straight away. But anyway, it still gives you an idea of what you can get to potentially.
I think it probably understated is just making sure that you've got very fresh hops as well. I think that
absolutely
has a really material impact on how intense a hop's going to be.
Yeah,
it's how fresh it is. Making sure it's been well stored, all those good things.
I've started to become a little bit more ruthless with hops because I think all of us sort of on the pod have probably got a slightly excessive stock of hops in the freezer, where there's some that have probably been hanging around for a bit longer than they should have. And I've made the mistake with a few brews where I've kind of got some hops out and I know that they're probably a bit past their best, and you open the packet and it's like, I'm not really getting much off of these, but I'll throw them in anyway and it'll probably be fine. And then sometimes you either sort of don't get anything off of it particularly, or worse, it ends up tasting a bit grassy or green or vegetal, and you kind of go, yeah, I think I know what has caused
cheesy.
that. It was that. I've not had any have been quite as bad that it's been cheesy, but that is a potential issue, particularly if they have been exposed to the air and oxidized a little bit. So I forget the particular chemical thing that causes that, but yeah. So I have been a little bit more ruthless recently in terms of, like, if I open a packet of hops and I'm just like, I can't smell anything, they look really dry and sort of crusty and not that great, I just go, it's not really worth sort of trying to use those just for the sake of it. So I have thrown a few hops away recently and just gone, I can afford to lose those. So anyway,
yeah, I'm with you. I've got far too many hops in the freezer.
Yeah.
More than I'm probably ever actually going to be able to use.
Well, that's the thing. Realistically, we're not going to get through them while they're at the best. So it's kind of like going.
No. I think a good investment is a vacuum sealer.
Yeah.
And some vacuum sealing bags. But I think, broadly speaking, I think if you've got something that's resealable and you can push most of the air out and keep them in the freezer, broadly they're going to remain relatively fresh.
Mm-hmm.
If you really want to go that step further, vacuum seal them, suck all the oxygen out, and then you're going to pretty much maintain freshness for as long as you can. Yeah.
It generally works pretty well doing that for me, but I think there's like I said, when you come across the packet that's probably been hiding at the back for sort of 4 or 5 years, the vacuum seal might have failed by that point, and it's just sort of a bit crusty looking and doesn't smell of anything anymore.
I might even still have some like Timmy raffle hops in the freezer somewhere. I think I might even have some hops from.
I've 100% still got some of Timmy's raffle hops for quite a few varieties actually. But
which must be four 4 or 5 years old. I would have
Easily,
thought.
easily. There's
Yeah.
2018 crops and 2019 crops that I know were from him because they've still got his sort of logo in the bag. So yeah,
Never mind. I think actually one of the things I have like pondered actually in the past is just kind of moving towards using someone like the malt miller, where you can just design a recipe. They're going to send you exactly the right malt, exactly the right amount of malt, the right amount of hops. You know everything's perfectly fresh, and you're going to pay a little bit more money for that because obviously just you don't get the economy of scale. But when you think about the price differential, in terms of like, okay, well, I might be paying 10, even 20% more.
yeah.
But when you put it on paper, would you be willing to spend, let's just say, 10 quid more for your beer to taste that much better? So if like, you did a side by side,
Yeah, yeah.
and then you went, clearly that beer's way better, I'd be
Yeah.
more than happy to pay an extra tenner.
Well, you've also
For
got to
that
factor
cake.
in the false economy of like how many of those hops you end up just throwing away, like I have been recently,
Yeah.
and going, okay, well that was probably 15 quid's worth of hops that I've just chucked straight in the bin because they are fucked. So yeah,
I think there's this illusion of being economically sensible by buying a kilo of hops
hmm
and just going, oh well, if look how much cheaper I can get it if I buy a kilo, and then
Yeah.
use 200 grams and then the other 800 grams sit there for a year.
I mean, there's probably 3 or 4 varieties that I can legitimately say like a kilo is good value because I know I'm going to use them within a year or two.
Yeah,
So, you know, and it's the pretty obvious ones. It's going to be like your Citra Mosaic. If I can buy it, the Revolution blend that I've just talked
Yeah.
about, or
Nelson.
Nelson instead.
yeah,
And probably maybe a bag of like Hallertau or something like that, or one of the German varieties that I would use
Yeah.
quite a lot.
yeah,
And that will take longer because obviously you're not going to be throwing it in generally in such a quantity. But I know that I am going to be brewing probably 3 or 4 beers per year that are going to have some in there. So, half
Yeah,
kilo of that is going to
agreed.
get used easily.
agreed. A Columbus would be another one for me probably.
But yeah,
Although I broadly speaking, tend to use that in bittering.
right.
You do tend to use. You can end up using quite a bit. Maybe not a kilo, but also it's just like you are only using it for bittering, so you can obviously also use it later in the hot side.
Yeah,
or even cold side,
underrated
actually.
as a later hop, I think. To be fair,
I
so
think
I
it
think
is.
that one is.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I think we'll get on to talking a bit about the nuance of adding
yeah,
a third hop, and I think Columbus is one of those that is great to add
adds a bit
a
of
little
depth.
twist, a little
definitely.
depth. Yeah, but we'll get on to that later. So what about if we're stepping out of getting familiar with hops and into I want to try starting to blend hops, Chucky?
Yeah.
Let's talk about maybe like the more advanced beginner.
Yeah, so it kind of follows on from what we were just saying about seeking out beers where you know what hop is in it and you can get an idea of the flavor profile from that, but equally where you can seek out beers where there's a kind of classic hop combo in there and it tells you what it is and you can get a grasp from that of what does a Cascade and a Centennial do together, or what does a Simcoe and Amarillo or Citra and Mosaic, which is certainly not a hard one to find nowadays. But, luckily for us, a lot of breweries nowadays do actually state what the hops are because people are much more interested in that. So, that's probably the next logical step, isn't it? To sort of start looking at kind of classic or proven hop combinations. And the ones that do come up the most are obviously the ones that are kind of go-tos for breweries because they know that they're going to be effective and produce a certain flavor profile that's fairly reliable. And it's we can kind of come up with some of those, and we've got a few examples here for some of them which you will see a lot for various different styles, and generally you can have a fairly good idea of what kind of flavor profile that's going to yield for you. So we've got some examples for kind of West Coast and classic American pales, and I just mentioned Cascade and Centennial. Have you used that combination yourself in the past, Owen?
I'm pretty sure I have. I mean, that in actual fact,
I mean, that is probably the ultimate like old school US hop combo, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's classic West Coast territory, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I think Centennial's kind of always been considered Cascade on steroids, right? And I think they share parentage, if I'm
Yes.
not wrong. So yeah, it's a great combo for that super citrus pine character. Suits
Yeah.
the West Coast beautifully.
100%. That's the classic kind of piffy grapefruit,
Yeah.
peel, bitterness, citrusy. Yeah, can't really go wrong with that. And I think there's a hell of a lot of, literally sort of what would be regarded as benchmark or classic American IPAs and pale ales that will use that sort of combination. I think one that springs to mind, I'm probably wrong, but I think stuff like Lagunitas IPA and stuff like that are kind of like Cascade and Centennial combos used together, and add some extra Citra to all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, if in doubt, add Citra in large quantities to any beer for good results.
It's a pretty solid bit of advice.
Yeah.
So yeah, what other combos have we got in that sort of vein as far as the American,
Well,
slightly more old school?
I mean, carrying on with that whole kind of sea hop thing, you can't go too far wrong with a bit of Chinook. Again, probably leaning more strongly into the pine.
Chinook
But
can be a bit
still,
divisive, can't it?
It can.
Are you a Chinook fan, or are you?
I am actually a Chinook
yeah.
fan. I actually really like it, but I think it's one of those hops where you just have to be a little bit careful with it.
Yeah.
It can get aggressive quite quickly. So the combo that we had here was Chinook and Cascade. So again, that's going to be a bit of a twist on the previous one. What you're probably going to be leaning more into is resin pine.
Yeah.
Still lots of grapefruit and citrus. But it'd be a slightly different character, and I'd be inclined to go more Cascade than Chinook.
Yeah.
Or I'd be thinking about how I might use the Chinook, perhaps in the boil, probably not in the dry hop, maybe a little bit in the whirlpool.
Mm-hmm.
So you're beginning to think a bit about, and that again is just sort of knowing your hops, really. Are you a fan?
Yes and no. Isn't it? I think as you've kind of said, it's treated with a deft hand, it can be amazing. And to be fair, I've actually had some beers where it's been all Chinook, and it's really surprised me because used right, you can actually pull out some quite fruity flavors from it that you wouldn't necessarily expect, because everyone does associate it with that kind of resinous pine sort of, and a slightly spiky kind of bitterness as well, which it definitely does bring. But there is some sort of citrusy fruit flavor in there as well that can be really nice. Equally, if you use it a bit too much, and I think heavily dry hopped Chinook can be a little bit raucous to the point of making it taste very piney and resiny, so that it might be a little bit unpleasant for some people.
Did I kind of vaguely remember Andy overusing Chinook in a dry hop once, and I
think
don't think he could drink the beer for about 6 months.
It was a pale fire recipe, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
Pressure drop pale fire. I think we were all. Was that one of the
Live Brew Day beers?
Live Brew Day beers that
I
we
think
did?
it might have been.
Yeah. And that is one that uses quite a lot of Chinook, and I think I don't know whether he put more in or whether it was just that particular. And again, worth mentioning, obviously, hops are not a totally consistent product, so you might talk about a combination and go like, this is what it's going to give you, but that is so dependent on that particular harvest and batch that you've got, and so many other things that are going on, that the goalposts are moving kind of constantly with this. So we're talking about sort of like a general idea of what things are going to taste like, but one year's Chinook might be very different to the next year's, and perhaps the Chinook at that particular time, or the one that Andy was using, was particularly resinous to the point where he found it was kind of, I think there was some description of it like, kind of, licking a pine board or something like that at one point.
Yeah. Kind of almost, it can get, if it gets too much, it can end up getting a bit furniture polish,
Yeah. Yes,
pine
exactly
furniture
that.
polish, right?
Hmm.
Or kind of pine car freshener,
Yeah.
and
On
it's
the aroma and the
yeah,
flavor and everything,
yeah,
really. So,
especially if it's mixed with citrus as well. So, yeah, you have to be a bit careful about that.
yeah.
One of the things actually, just what you were saying, just triggered a thought in my mind because I think Dylan was in the chat just talking about alpha acids.
Hmm.
I guess it's probably worth just touching on that sort of briefly, in so much as I think it was the point you mentioned about how they're natural products, right?
Yeah.
And alpha acids do vary from crop to crop, year to year.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those things that you want to sort of pay attention to when you do buy hops, and make
Hmm.
sure that you do update the alpha acid in your brewing
Oh, yeah.
software,
Absolutely.
because that can end up.
Hmm.
Normally, it doesn't vary massively, but it can end up like causing you some issues if you're not too
Oh,
careful.
for sure.
Um,
Well, there's and there's quite a lot of issues with that going on with noble hops at the moment, which as an example, and that would be more probably on the side of undershooting IBUs with those, because a lot of growers are struggling to get the alpha acids up as high as they would normally be. Various issues with those varieties, and also changing climate and a few other things coming together to cause that problem. But if you're getting your SARS for your Pilsner and you're using those for your bittering hops, and you've just entered them as the generic value that might be, I don't know, 4 or 5%, but they're actually, I think I've seen some that are as low as less than 2% recently, where they're dropping right down into that point where that's really not that much use for a bittering hop, because you're going to have to add so much of it.
yeah,
You probably want to be swapping that out for something else. So it's definitely an issue with the noble hops in that sense, but more generally speaking, there is obviously quite a lot of variation. And with newer varieties, I think particularly where they're not quite as well established, you can see quite a wide swing as well between like one year to the next. Generally, the sort of average values tend to settle down a little bit with them once they've been really well established and grown in. But you might see a wider range of values for newer hop varieties. So definitely something just to be aware of and keep in mind.
yeah. We'll talk a bit about hopping rates and hopping schedules in a bit. We'll talk about
Yeah.
that later. I've seen a few posts in the comments about that. One of the bits what I just want to call out was Teddy G over at Ubrew. Just called out a website called beeranalytics.com, or it's
Okay.
beer-analytics.com.
Not seen that one myself. Have you had a quick look?
Yeah, I think I've poked around this before, actually. On the landing page, it's really interesting. There's some discover hop varieties, and there's some of the newer hops like Strata, Nectaron, Anchovy, Crush, Peacherine.
Yeah.
And it gives advice in terms of the styles that you could use to hop in.
Oh,
It
nice.
gives recommendations on hop pairings, dosage. It's actually very cool, and it appears that it also connects to a number of recipes as well. So it looks like there is a recipe archive, which I think perhaps you might be able to search by hops. And there's also an interesting like filtery thing at the side where you can filter by beer style, filter by hops, filter by yeasts. I don't know, I'd probably have to have a little poke around in here. But one to just promote and
Yeah, sounds good.
check
So let's
out and
have a look at that.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting website, so I'll
Cool.
look at that later.
Right. So let's whiz through a few of these other kind of what would be considered proven or classic kind of hop combos, and we've already mentioned Citra and Mosaic a number of times, so doesn't really need to be talked about
Needs
too
no
much.
introduction, that one.
Going back to the West Coast ones, we skipped over Simcoe and Amarillo, which I think was one I added in to the notes because it's definitely a combo that I remember fondly, and I think it was probably what was the beer? It was Founders All Day IPA that sort of put me onto that particular hop combination, because I just thought it was a really nice beer, and when you have a nice beer and you kind of go, I will need to find out what the hop combo is in that, because I really like the flavor. That was what gave that beer its well, according to the notes we have here, thanks to some AI input, that should deliver you some layered citrus forward profile with a bit of resin and floral depth.
Nice. Nice. I like floral depth.
Yeah. So if we're looking for other alternatives for maybe tropical focused, which is basically code for Neepers and hazy kind of beers, what
Coast
other
style.
Yeah, East Coast style, what other hop combos are good options there?
Yeah, I mean, interesting. Well, I think one of our friends down under that's listening along live was asking about kind of awareness of some of the Australian varieties, namely Enigma. What were the other ones? Just trying to find a comment. Well, a couple of those. Galaxy. Galaxy's probably the most well known, and the other is Vic's Secret.
I think Galaxy and Vic Secret would probably be the two main ones, wouldn't they, for Australian hops that people are aware of anyway.
Yeah, and those can deliver some amazing tropical flavours. I'm not sure I've ever made a beer with just Galaxy and Vic Secret. I have used both hops in various different brews. I often do enjoy a bit of Galaxy. One thing to watch out for Galaxy is not using it hot side. You could probably get away with it in a whirlpool, but I'd recommend making sure that's below 80 degrees. Vic's Secret, but essentially that combination should be providing a really intense passion fruit and tropical note vibe.
Just to explore that quickly a second, we've mentioned a couple of hops where we've talked about maybe them being a little bit more intense on the bitterness, or delivering a slightly spiky bitterness. Galaxy and some of the other Australian hops can certainly be examples of that, and Chinook was the other one that we were kind of talking about. So one of the main things, obviously, if they're extremely high alpha acids, as Owen just said, generally just be a little bit cautious about having it in the hot side, even if it's like very late in the boil, because it may be exposed for a bit longer, and you can very quickly isomerize those alpha acids and create a hell of a lot of IBUs, more so than maybe what you're looking for. And I think the other thing about some of those hops is also the cohumulone levels in them may be quite high, and I believe that is the case with quite a few of the Australian hops, and it's definitely the case with Chinook as well. And that basically can just render us slightly more aggressive, and we'll use the word spiky again, kind of bitterness from it. So that's one of we're skipping a little bit ahead to some of the analytics with that, but that's one of the things that's worth kind of looking at with some of the hops, just to see whether or not it's something that you should maybe be looking to use maybe more later on. But it's horses for courses, and some people like a little bit more of that aggressive flavor profile, particularly from things like Chinook, and that for that reason they may want to keep it in the boil rather than not. But certainly nowadays you tend to see a lot of people saying Galaxy, not so much. I mean, I know I've ruined a few beers before by having too much Galaxy through the boil myself. But.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an art and a skill to using Australian hops for the exact reason that you've talked about. But if you do have that skill and art, I think you can get into some incredible flavors and some really incredible tropicality from those hops. So they're definitely worth exploring, just with the warning label that we've provided. We're probably going to get into like a bit of conversation about how we might start blending in additional hops to those combinations. But one of the classic combos is Citra Mosaic Galaxy. That's one that you'll tend to see quite a bit of commercially, because the Galaxy amps the Citra Mosaic even further, which is amazing. Azacca, you mentioned earlier, I think a really good example, just pairing that with something like a Citra or a Mosaic could really help to kind of just round out the tropicality.
It's a good one for that specific pineapple
dimension.
note as well, isn't it, with Azacca?
Yeah.
So we're also thinking about hops if you want a particular specific fruit flavor. Some hops will be better for that. And Azaka is always Azaka and Vic Secret actually are the two that if anyone says, "Oh, I would like it to taste like pineapple," that would be like the go-to suggestions for those.
Yeah, I think El Dorado as well. I think can
Hmm.
often get recognised as quite
Yeah.
pineapple-y. Um, what was the one I was just thinking of that tends to get quite lemon and lime, and it's not New Zealand.
Not Motueka.
No, it's an American hop. It will
Uh,
come to me later. Um, so yeah, that's just a few of the.
not lemon drop.
No, it's
No.
not. It's more famous than that one. It will come to me later. Um, so that's more some of examples of the tropical kind of focused sort of
Yeah.
options that we've got. What about kind of more balance? Maybe if you want something, maybe you're brewing, maybe something a little bit more drinkable, maybe just a classic pale ale. What are you kind of thinking in terms of you want a bit of complexity, but you want to keep it balanced?
Yeah. I mean, this one, I think you can kind of take it in any direction you want, really. There's one of the suggestions we got on our notes here was kind of Simcoe and Centennial, and that's probably in terms of an IPA type suggestion. I mean, that's probably going to be dependent again on like what how much hop how much kind of load you're putting in as far as the hopping rate and stuff as well. But Simcoe and Centennial could be a good option there. I think blending hops from different regions can be a really good option if you're looking for a slightly more interesting, but maybe not quite as outright fruit forward or tropical kind of combination. So when I sort of think about balanced and complex, I kind of start to think about stuff like I don't know, West Coast pilsners and things like that, where you might be putting in some spicy hops mixed in with some of those resinous kind of West Coast beers, bit of sort of beers, hops even, and things like that. But I mean, this one's a bit of a, a slightly wide and open-ended kind of question, really, because it also depends on what the beer style is, doesn't it? So, if you wanted a balanced and complex hop combo for a lager, for example, you might obviously be sticking with noble hop varieties, but you might want to choose something that's floral, but then also something that's got a little bit of citrus or perhaps a little bit more of a spicy note. So I think that's probably more about just looking at contrasting flavors. Probably, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it probably starts leading us a bit more into that kind of when you start getting a bit avant-garde with the hop combinations
Yeah,
and you're not sure. There's one school of thought that goes, fuck it, let's just brew the beer and find out.
yeah,
Cool, go for it. No harm in that. The second would be do some research on each hop, read the descriptors, make a decision for yourself as to whether those two things are going to work.
yeah,
And that's a lot about your own mind's eye. So obviously everyone's kind of preference and interest in hop, like the flavour, eventual hop flavour you want in the beer, is dependent. That's personal.
mm-hmm.
And then the final point would be like these new tools like AI that you can actually use to help aid you to some of your decision making.
Yeah,
We'll probably get into that in a second, just in terms of how can you start to use that in a really powerful way. And it's something I've sort of discovered fairly recently, having like I don't know, I would say the last 12 months I've started using AI more and more and more. Your
yeah.
chat GPTs and your co-pilots and all those sorts of things.
I think I was very skeptical about it when it came to that. Obviously, early on, a lot of people were sort of going, "Oh, look at this recipe that AI has thrown up," and you could see that it was just a hodgepodge of like every recipe that's ever been put online, sort of amalgamated together, and just looks a bit of a mess. So I was a little bit dismissive of it for quite a while, but obviously since we've started looking at it for things like this and using it a bit more for our own research for podcasts, but also just looking for ideas for recipes for our own beers and everything. It's definitely starting to yield some more useful results. And obviously that's, when we've got the experience that most of us probably have from being at this point in, our home brewing experience, we can kind of look at that and go, yeah, actually, like, what it's saying that hop combo should taste like is probably going to be pretty close. So I'm starting to be a little bit more trusting of it now as far as going. I think I could probably say, tell me what these two hops are going to taste like together, and it's probably going to be fairly close to what it might be. I might still be a little bit skeptical if I go, I'm going to give it 4 hop combination and say, what is that going to taste like? And it's probably going to be, a bit of a stab in the dark, even with AI kind of looking at it. But
that kind of is a part of the problem with AI, which is effectively a large language model, basically using the entire internet as its database, and then kind of just sort of returning what others have written about it, which is actually super useful because it's just doing like all that research for you in an instant, which is fantastic. Yeah. And to be fair, I would say AI has come on leaps and bounds in the last 12 months from probably that whole, oh, look, I got AI to create me a recipe, which looks a bit shit.
Yes, exactly.
Today, where it is, like, I would say it's pretty smart. Of course, we fast forward a little while until we get to I can't remember what the terminology is for when artificial intelligence becomes smarter than humans. There's a name for it. It's like the Horizon event or something like that. Right. I can't remember what it's called. So it'll be really interesting as to, like, when we get to the point where AI is smarter than we are, what recipe it will start to generate at that point. Yeah. You could end up with like completely new beer styles emerging as a result. Anyway, check out our episode on brewing in the future. More mad conversation about
that has been discussed.
That might come about, but anyway, where did we get? We got Simcoe and Centennial.
Well, and I think we sort of moved on from that bit. So we've touched on some of the more kind of traditional and well-known combos, but as far as traditional styles, we've talked about kind of lager hops and noble hops together, and maybe something a little bit spicy, a little bit floral together, and Tettnang and Hallertau is in the notes here, which I think is an absolute belter for pilsners and things like that. Bit of Tettnang in there, it's always a good option. But obviously, if we're talking about traditional styles, we could talk about UK beers as well. So what sort of trad UK hop combos would spring to mind for you, Owen?
Oh, good question.
Get your camera hat on and imagine yourself in that musty beer festival hall drinking flat beer from a gravity-fed cask that's a little bit too warm. What hop combos are you gravitating towards in that situation?
Offense to our camera member followers there, guys. I'm sure you don't mind us having a little jab at you.
Just telling it how it is,
Yeah, that's fine. Mate, I don't know. I don't tend to know a huge amount about UK hops, but I do know. I really like Bramlin Cross. I think that's great. With some EKG. I think EKG can bring like a kind of quite a nice citrus flavour, and I think that helps to lift the hedgerow a little bit. I'm not, personally, hands up, shoot me down, not a big fan of Fuggles.
Yep, that's fine.
Not a huge fan.
But all you need to say, Owen, is EKG and Fuggles, and you've basically done the hop combo for probably about. I'm being silly now, but it's not going to be 90% of UK beers, but traditional beers. But you know what I'm getting at anyway.
Maybe not. Who knows?
But Fuggles and EKG is a classic UK hop combo.
It is, yeah, for sure.
But you could probably insert any other UK hop and EKG and say that's a classic UK hop combo as well. So, but I mean, on that point, you mentioned Bramlin Cross. Obviously, Bramlin Cross is is a noticeable UK one because it has got quite a distinct flavour profile that goes a little bit beyond just floral hedgerow type vibes, with its kind of like blackberry kind of blackcurrant type notes in
it's
there.
great. I think it's the
Really
best.
nice, really nice, really good in darker beers or slightly darker ales as well.
Yeah.
But
What
any
else
others that you
you
can
got
think of?
Target. Target, I would say, is probably one of those. Target's like relatively clean bittering hop for a UK hop. I think
Yeah,
you got Challenger, which I think is Challenger is actually probably a great one to start to think about blending into some of your New World, US, New Zealand, Australian hops as well. I think it can create like a really interesting complexity. And we'll talk a bit
yeah,
more about that later. First Gold is a good one.
yeah. First Gold's great.
Um,
That's got a little bit of that kind of orangey, slightly
yeah,
marmaladey. That's another quite common UK sort of hop character, is a slightly orange peel marmaladey kind of vibe. I think you can get with
plus
that.
some sticks.
And
Like
twigs.
marmalade on a stick.
Twiggy marmalade. Delicious.
Twiggy marmalade. Sounds delicious. And then you've got
It's
a lot
just marmalade served off a twig. Yeah, you can
yeah, you basically
picture
just got a lot of variations of Goldings, haven't you? You've basically got Styrian Golding, Goldings,
Yeah.
East Kent Goldings, First Gold, which I assume is a different version.
I
of
mean,
Goldings.
obviously we have a lot of newer varieties as well that are coming out, but they're not really quite established enough to be something that we would consider in a classic or well established hop combo, I wouldn't say.
No,
So
no.
we'll leave those out of the discussion for now. But anyway, so I've we've waffled on a little bit there about some of the hop combos you might come across that are sort of more proven. But basically, if you're seeing something that comes up in commercial beers or commercial beer recipes, 'cause obviously you can look up recipes online as well and see what what are a lot of the American pale ales using, whether it be a more old school American pale ale or it might be a more modern kind of hazy take on it. You might be looking at lagers or whatever the style might be. If you see that a lot of them are using a particular hop combo, you can probably be quite safe in assuming that that's going to be a good starting point. So that was the general gist of what we were trying to get at with that section that may have rambled on a little bit longer than intended. But anyway, there is also
Good
another
starting point.
yeah, good starting point for particularly for the newer brewers. But there is also another option which will kind of save you worrying about it too much at all. Almost like a kind of cheat code for looking at hop blending, which is to use pre-made blends where the hop companies are basically literally blended hop pellets together in specific quantities to yield a particular flavor profile. And we've already mentioned one of them, Revolution Blend, quite a bit already, which goes to show sort of probably how much we sort of think of that particular one. But there's quite a lot of other examples of them. So in terms of blends that I've actually used myself, I've used Falconer's Flight and a variation of that called Falconer's Flight 7 Cs, which is 7 varieties of sea hops. Those are Yakima Chief produced blends. We talked about Revolution Blend already. Revolution hops also do Turkey's Pick. Not sure where that name comes from, but it's I think it's slightly more Rawaka led rather than Nelson. Pink Boots is another Yakima blend, which is made for I think it might be like International Women's Day or something like that, or to celebrate sort of female brewers in the industry or something, hence the name. Yellow Sub is one from Bath Hass, I think, which is a sort of German hop blend. And there's lots of other ones which I don't have names for, but have you used many hop blends yourself, Owen?
Probably same as you. I think I've used Falconer's Flight. I think
Yeah.
I've used Revolution Blend a lot recently. Yellow Sub's been around for quite a while. I was checking out the Cross My Loaf website the other day, actually. And
Oh,
was
yes,
interesting
yes.
to see that they have some of their own blends.
Yeah, they do their own in-house ones, don't they?
Yeah,
Which is
they
quite
do.
cool.
Yeah, which was quite interesting to see. But yeah, I think those are a good option and kind of take some of the thinking out, and you can almost then just treat it like a smash beer, even though it's not a smash beer. You don't have to overthink it. Right, it's pretty easy. So, I think one of the things we want to sort of start exploring a little bit of was going to be like, okay, so if you've mastered understanding hops, you've mastered using those in a single hop beer, you've started to explore some of the classic combos. What's next, right? And I think this is the point where you might start becoming more thoughtful about the flavour profile that you're looking for, or you almost go, you know, I've made this Citra Mosaic beer a few times now. I'd actually really like it to have a bit more of a kind of piney depth to it, or I kind of want a little bit more complexity to it, or I might want to lean it more into a kind of stone fruit character. And this is where you can start thinking about a third hop, or maybe a third and a fourth hop to begin that journey of blending in stuff. And I think that's where your kind of mind's eye of what you're looking for in the end result of the beer and how to bring hops to the fore to achieve that. And that's probably for me where actually the AI thing can be super useful. And I think you can use it in a couple of different ways, and one of which might be, what if I made a beer with this hop, and this hop, and maybe in these proportions and in this schedule, what kind of flavour aroma profile am I going to give? And it can bring back a relatively accurate perception of what the beer's likely to smell and taste like. Or alternatively, you can turn its head and say, look, I'm looking to make this beer style with these predominant flavour profiles and this sort of aroma. What do you recommend in terms of the hops I ought to use? And you can also then prompt it to give you hop scheduling advice as well. And I've actually kind of tested it out a little bit. I've not used it in anger much in the way of then going, oh, I'm actually going to go and brew that beer and test
Not
it.
fully committed yet.
Not fully committed yet. But maybe I should put my money where my mouth is. But it actually is seemingly very good at going, yeah, you should try this hop, and this hop, and maybe lean into using more of this hop in the dry hop and using more of this hop in the whirlpool, and you should better with this. And it's kind of like, it seems like on the face of it, a really, really useful tool to go and explore. What's your thoughts?
No, I mean, I agree. Like I said, I've certainly not yet used it directly to kind of influence a recipe that I've actually brewed. As I said, I'm very much in the sort of beta testing phase as far as my use of AI for brewing. But from what I've seen so far, as I was saying before, it seems to kind of be throwing up the ideas or kind of suggestions that I would get from looking at other stuff myself. So it's and also based on my own experience of it. So like I said, I feel like my trust is increasing in it to the point where I'll be like, oh, I'll definitely be happy to use that as a starting point at the very least, to kind of go, okay, well, I want to know how to, like you say, maybe push that, I don't know, passion fruit flavor in this particular hop combination. What do I need? Should I maybe bump up the Simcoe in there, or maybe it's more about having more Citra, or whatever it might be. And it seems like it's throwing slightly more viable suggestions and kind of reasoning for those ideas at the minute. So I think it's going in the right direction anyway.
It's a useful sounding board.
Yeah.
For exploring ideas, isn't it?
But we don't want everyone to rely entirely on AI.
No, not at this point.
And we can't say that it's going to be entirely reliable in all situations. So that aside, There is a lot of information and data out there that you can look to, and probably one of the easiest sort of options in terms of a visual reference, if it's been supplied, because it's not always the case you can actually see this, but kind of flavor descriptors and charts, which tend to be presented in that kind of like flavor wheel style graph where you'll have descriptors. And I've kind of created my own one that we've used on the hop tester sections that we've done. Did one on the previous episode, and you'll have, you know, your kind of like citrus, pine, herbal, spicy, earthy, stone
Sticky.
fruit, tropical, yeah, all that, you know, various different descriptors. No, nobody's kind of settled on a definitive what are the descriptors that you should have. And almost always when you do pick some, you'll try a beer or a hop and look at it and go, oh, there's not that one flavor that I'm getting that I want to actually pick out specifically that's on there. But you know, you can do the best that you can with them. But you know, those can be a starting point for going, okay, what is this hop going to be, more tropical, or is it going to be more citrus, or whatever it might be. And I guess probably at that point, if particularly if we're talking about starting to involve more than just two hops, we also need to maybe think a little bit about just the general kind of approach to flavor combinations, and a couple of general concepts on that front. And by that I mean, and this is very, you know, this could be applied to sort of when you're cooking food or doing a recipe that you're coming up with from scratch for a meal or whatever. It, you know, it applies across the board, whether it's beer, hop combinations, or whatever it might be. But what I'm getting at is things like, are you choosing something to be like an emphasis on a flavor that's already there, or something that's going to complement a flavor, or something that's going to amplify it in some way? Or are you looking for something that's going to contrast to that or add a different layer to it or whatever? So you know, for example, like the Citra kind of excuse me, the Citra Mosaic kind of classic combo, you wouldn't say that they're particularly like, you know, yes, Mosaic maybe leans a little bit more into mango, perhaps. Citra might be slightly more fruity citrus focused or whatever, but they're both in that kind of tropical citrus kind of category. They're not bringing anything that's wildly different to each other. So I would say that while they're very commonly used together, they're quite overlapping in terms of flavor profile, and they're more like complementary. They're kind of amplifying each other and just pushing that sort of broader tropical flavor profile. Whereas if you want something that's maybe going to add another layer or bring a little bit more complexity to it, you're like, okay, I do want something fruity, but perhaps I'm going to choose a hop that's maybe got a more stone fruit led or berry led flavor to it or something like that. And that's where perhaps looking at flavor wheels, they might give you some indication of that. But you know, obviously we've got some skeptics in the room.
Well, maybe. I think it was an interesting point.
No, I think it is a valid point, and you know,
Yeah.
I mean, I've kind of proved that myself with one of the hops that we just tested
Well, the
recently.
last episode,
To
right,
be
in the
fair,
hop testing.
but you know, equally, you know, where hops are really well established, and it's like this hop is massively favoring, you know, I don't know, like I said, a stone fruit or berry flavor versus tropical or citrus, you might be able to be a little bit more reliant on that, you know, just as a guide. You know, it's never going to be a kind of like, this is a definitive, it's going to make your beer taste of,
Oh,
you know,
for sure. Like,
specifically blueberry or whatever it might be. You know, it's
every variety has a predominant flavor profile, doesn't it? There's variation in year to year, acreage to acreage.
Yep.
Breweries, as Rich called out in his comment, you know, breweries going to be, certainly the larger ones, hand selecting certain acreages or certain plots of hops that they think are going to contribute to the beer that they have in mind, or their particular beer style specifically. But as homebrewers, I think all we can do is just kind of do our best to get a generalized idea of what is going to go on. And I think, you know, the flavor wheel, and I think the point you're making, which if forgive me for sort of paraphrasing, is like, unless you're very experienced and you know what you're doing, don't try and combine a predominantly herbaceous hop with a tropical hop that also punches out loads of, I don't know, woody character, and expect a great result.
Yeah.
Not to say.
Well, yeah, contrast can be great, but not necessarily that extreme a contrast, right?
You're walking a fine line there, and I think if anyone kind of wants maybe to explore some of those ideas in a deeper way about how you can get a bit contrarian with using different types of hops in a beer, I think the moot episode that we did was really, I think it was the moot episode where they tended to blend in some UK hops with some US hops, and I personally think that they actually do that really well.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of shows just how, experienced they probably are at thinking about that. But I think it's going to require bringing it back to the kind of flavour wheel, really thinking about, if I'm going to use a UK hop, maybe a UK hop that's going to express more citrus, like a EKG or a First Gold, that might contribute in with an Amarillo or a Citra. Because then there's a complementary thing going on there, which is focused on citrus, but there might be an interesting element of an undertone of wood floor.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's
floor.
there's a fine line between contrasting and clashing, right? So I guess that's
I want an undertone
that's
of
what we're
mud and
getting
sticks.
at. Shed floor is what we're looking for. But I mean,
I just
Rich in the chat is it's fair enough to point out the limitations of these things, and we're not saying it's a definitive, like, just look at the flavor wheel and it'll tell you exactly how to combine hops. It's just an indication of what you might be able to expect from it, right? So
sure.
we're certainly not presenting that as a this is what you can use to define what this combination is going to taste like, but at least it might give you an indication. Okay, well, I want to look for a couple of more tropical focused hops, and then one that maybe is a bit more citrus focused, so it can perhaps lift that soft tropical fruit or stone fruit flavor up a little bit with a bit of bright citrus flavor. It's probably about as good as you can expect from that.
We talk a lot about like top notes and stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
in terms of
exactly.
Sometimes those really tropical hops can end up getting a bit, dare I say, flabby.
Mm-hmm.
They're all a bit like soft tropical fruit, like papaya and mango and stuff like that. It's almost like you don't get the best out of them unless you've got something that's a bit sharper and it kind of brings it to life. So
no, I think that's kind of essential, really, because it's like, just relentless stone fruit, peachy, melony, kind of soft, oh, it's nice, but it's not really like got any zip to it, is a bit meh, really, isn't it? Even if it's got a really nice fruity flavor to it. So and then we could, there is a lot of other information out there in terms of the analytics of the actual hop oils and stuff, and I think this is a thing where you might look at it and think, oh, I can probably, like, if I really get to know the effect of myrcene and linalool and geraniol and all the rest of them, that I can probably add these numbers up and work out exactly what it's going to taste like. And I think that's probably the biggest kind of fallacy with the hop and analytics that there is, because basically you've got the numbers might look almost identical for different hop varieties, and they come out tasting completely different. One might express a massively different flavor, and I mean, I'm no expert in this, but from what I understand, a lot of those essential oils are basically the same kind of things that are used in like perfume and things like that, and they're extremely volatile and they can produce radically different aromas and flavors based on very small changes in the quantity that they're combined in, to the point where basically it's a bit of a crapshoot, like as to what you're going to get out of that if you have a 1% difference of one or the other. So what I'm getting at is, I think as far as like looking at those as a home brewer, it's almost pointless to sort of go, well, what's the percentage of this oil versus this oil, aside from sort of looking at it and going, well, it's got a lot of oil in it, so it's probably quite potent. I'm not sure you can really tell much else from it. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I mean, yeah, I personally don't tend to pay too much attention to oil constitution. And there's a bit of a school of thought that I think you shared with me the other day, which was, should you try and think about perhaps thinking about bringing hops together that have different hop oil makeups.
Yes.
So that you don't just all have the same kind of thing, unless of course that's what you're kind of looking for. Like if you want predominantly citrus, go with a lot of linalool.
Yes. As a broad stroke thing, it's like, okay, that might accentuate this other hop because it's got a very similar profile as far as the oils. But beyond that, I don't think we can go like, okay, well, I know that this has got 5% of this, so it's maybe going to make this one suddenly taste like, kumquat or whatever other random fruit you might want to name.
Kumquat always makes me laugh, the name of that. Yeah, for sure. I'm not sure how much. Like you said, I mean, sort of the oil content is one thing. There's a X factor that goes into hops, and that's possibly rooted in thiols and their interactions with yeast, and the fact that hops do just throw different flavours, even though that they might have the same kind of oil content. So I think it's kind of, there's a limit to how analytical you can get before maybe you just need to start to lean into experience. And I think that's probably the thing that we've tried to emphasise actually, is there's no real replacement for experience with hops, and you kind of just have to get that under your belt before you can really start to experiment and be really bringing together what you're looking for.
For sure.
So
I mean, I kind of brought that up because I think at one point early on I sort of assumed that, oh well, if they're giving you all this information, it must be like usable in some way for you to actually predict some sort of flavor outcome from it. But basically it seems like nobody really looks at that in any meaningful way. I've never heard a brewery sort of talk about choosing a particular hop because they looked at the specific balance of hop oils in it or whatever. It's
No, I think it would be an interesting conversation point should we ever have some kind of real hop experts on the podcast again, just to really sort of dive into like hop oil makeup and levels,
who's using that information kind of thing. It's almost like perhaps maybe they use it themselves more rather than for the breweries just to sort of go, it's almost like a measure of, okay, well, how does this harvest compare to the last one, or something like that, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, from a consistency point of view, it might be a bit of a like dick swinging thing as well. Like, I've grown the spiciest chili. It's kind of like I've grown I've grown the hop with the most of this oil. Maybe I don't really know, but definitely one to kind of find out.
Well, of course, on that note, actually, like one of the beers that we tried on the last pod with the Alora, in their sort of marketing blurb for it, they talk about a sort of massive proportion of hop oils that they don't really know what it is, or something like that. Like unidentified
never been
hop
discovered
oils
before. Yeah.
And then weirdly, they also then name what most of it is, and they go, it's actually like it's got a lot of this selenine in it, which And I was like, well, how is it unknown if you've just named what most of it is? But anyway, that is beside the point. But either way, like if it's unknown, it doesn't really like provide you any helpful information as to what it's going to do anyway.
Yeah.
But then equally, I looked up selenine off the back of that because I was like, oh, well, I wonder if there's actually something specific that tells you about. And other than apparently it's present in a lot of like cannabis as well as hops, like apparently, a lot of the sort of super strength varieties have a high proportion of selenine in. There was like virtually no information on what it actually does as far as flavor, aroma, or anything else other than being vaguely herbal. So
Vaguely herbal.
It was like, okay, well that's really useful.
I'm not sure whether Alora was particularly herbaceous either.
No, it wasn't at all for me. So it was like, well, it doesn't seem to be.
So that doesn't really translate either,
useful information whatsoever. So
when you go, the predominant hop oil should be herbaceous, and then you go,
it's got loads of this brand new, slightly
Tastes...
mysterious hop that we don't know anything about, but might make it herbaceous, which it doesn't taste like. Yeah. So I guess you see where we're going with that.
And then of course you've got the whole kind of hop rubbing thing, right? Like you go to these events with hop growers and you kind of rub the hops and stuff, and you get a certain impression of what the hop might provide. But I get, and that's not something I've actually ever been involved in doing. But I do know from when we talked to Charles Farron when we did that experimental hop brewing episode, that the impression that they got from just rubbing the hops to what presented in the beer were actually quite different.
Yes.
So again, it's kind of interesting in terms of...
Yeah, and I think that comes back to, again, the whole thing of like the combinations of all these volatile oils and aroma compounds and whatever are so, random, for want of a better word, that, you might have a few in there that rubbed in your hand, warm up and flash off, and you go like, oh my god, it's amazing, and then none of that's made it into the beer when you've brewed them, because you already have lost them by the point they've sort of hit the hot hot wort. So
you got 3 seconds of amazing aroma.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's gone.
In a flash.
Point. Good point.
Right, I think you're thirsty.
Yeah, I'm thirsty, and I think it's time for a commercial break.
Oh yes, let's take a commercial break.
Are you going to put the commercial break music in? Tricky?
Well, I might do. I don't know. We might need to do a reimagined version of that, perhaps, because it's a bit sad with somebody's voice on it that's not with us anymore. So maybe we need to have a different version. But in the meantime, we can just do a silly voice ourselves. Let's take it to the commercial break.
Yeah. What have you got?
I didn't bring anything out specifically for the commercial break, but I'll just pick up the can of what I've got on the desk here. So I have Northern Monk's Heathen Club, using up leftovers of a Christmas multi-pack that
Heathen
got
Club
bought for me. So yeah, I'm not 100% what is the difference between this and, because there's normal Heathen.
ABV?
And there's Heathen Club. So this is 4.6%.
I think
Heathen is the stronger,
6, isn't it?
Yeah, Heathen's like the stronger IPA normally, isn't it? Because Faith is their sort of standard hazy. So maybe this is like a session hazy IPA or something that they've got. Yeah, so I'll get that in the glass. See if I can read anything off of the can. Northern Monk are kind of a bit of a brewery that you see all the time, but I don't know, not that talked about maybe these days. Would that be fair to say?
I'd probably agree with that. I guess it becomes a bit more regional, right? A lot of beer is very regional.
Yeah. But they're very much sort of established supermarket kind of brewery as well, aren't they?
Based in Leeds, right?
Yeah, they are Leeds.
Yeah. So I'm sure if you're like Leeds, Yorkshire based, you're probably gonna hear a lot more about them.
Yeah.
But I do think that they probably lent much more into that supermarket contract.
Yeah.
But
type on they from the beers I have, they seem to knock out consistently decent, for for want of a better word, Liam's put in the chat, macro craft brewers. I think it's fair to say you could classify them in that
Yeah,
category for the guys that are
yeah.
knocking out volume to the supermarkets and stuff.
It's
You
a
know,
brew
yeah,
dog equivalent, isn't it?
I think of them and kind of vocation for me as my sort of safe options when it's like you're in the supermarket and they haven't got anything that's that, you know, anything that's a little bit more obscure or whatever, that you can pretty much rely on their beers to be decent. Smells good. I mean, I've got no other information off the can really as far as anything about hops or other ingredients. So apart
Citra
from it,
Mosaic, isn't it?
apart from it being
Ethan?
4.6, yeah,
I
apart from it
think
being 4.6% and it
pretty
being
standard.
hazy, I mean, it definitely smells like your pretty typical kind of Citra Mosaic type beer. Yeah, little bit of tropical mangoey, melon-like flavor on there. Very little bitterness. Not super thick, so it's quite light, quite drinkable. Definitely what I would describe as a sort of session, sort of hazy IPA, perhaps. Yeah, not a massively sort of thick or kind of cloying mouthfeel on it. Some nice sort of brighter sort of citrus notes in there coming through. It's perfectly crushable, hazy pale ale kind of. Yeah, I don't want to just sort of dismiss it and say it's supermarket hazy beer. It's kind of better than that, but yeah, it's not going to set your world on fire, but it's perfectly decent and really good.
Unoffensive.
So yeah,
Unoffensive Friday night.
solid
Pint of
solid
hazy.
Friday night beer. I mean, I'd rather have had a bigger can of it, so I'll pay it that compliment.
Yeah. Who wants
It's
wants to
nice.
drink a 330?
330s are just not. There's, you know, that'll be gone in two more swigs, I think.
All
So.
right, yeah. You're gonna be
Not
straight
sufficient,
into it.
not
What else have you
sufficient.
got lined up then? Come on.
One of the other ones out of that multi pack, so I've got
Oh,
the
right,
fave
okay.
afterwards.
Working your way through the multi pack.
Yeah,
Very good.
yeah.
Very good. Cool. What's your rating? All right.
We're out 5, aren't we? So
Yeah.
I would go. What do I say for that? I always feel like I'm being. It's like that kind of Untapped thing where you feel like anything under a 4 is slagging it off, and you're like, no, it's not. That's actually quite
No.
reasonable.
No.
So I'd go 3.7 for that.
Okay.
Solid,
Yeah,
solid score.
solid beer. Solid middle of the road beer. I think 3.7 is probably considered. Is 3.6, 3.7 average, pretty much.
Probably.
I think
That's the
you've got to
silly
get
thing
above
now. You
that
think
to
you
be
think in
kind of
terms of
recognised.
Untapped scores as to what is okay.
Yeah. Liam was saying actually they used to do some Patreon project beers.
Yeah.
Out
To
of
be
Northern-
fair, they did
those-
used to put quite a few sort of their more limited edition brews into the supermarkets, which was nice to see. But
Yeah, I'm sure I picked up a couple from the supermarket over the years,
yeah.
and they were actually really good. But yeah, we don't seem to see a lot of that these days. Cool.
Yeah, what you got?
I've got a beer from a brewery in Northern Ireland called Beer Hut Brewing Co.
Okay, not heard of them.
No, I think I ended up getting these through Bruiser. So for anyone who's not familiar with Bruiser, it's like a monthly subscription, beer subscription to your door type vibe. And I think what had happened is I ended up with a mystery box because I'd forgotten to select a brewery, and they sent me
Yeah.
Beer Hut Brewing Co. And I've actually been very impressed. I think this is probably maybe one of 2 of the last beers. This is a double milkshake IPA.
Ooh, milkshake IPA.
Yeah. Well, if anyone's been following along with the podcast for a while, they will know my feelings on milkshake IPAs. But I picked this out partly as it's been hanging around for quite a while, and I'm scraping the back of the fridge, and it's the fact that this is Galaxy and Mosaic. So I thought that was like an interesting kind of leaning into the hop combo vibe. So what do you think I should be getting from Galaxy and Mosaic?
Well, dank,
Dank, mango,
sweaty mango,
sweaty mango.
maybe a bit of a more tropical, perhaps passion fruit like note off of the Galaxy. Um, but I think Galaxy can also give you a little bit more of a, what's the word to use? I don't want to say herbal, but maybe a little bit of a how to say hoppy flavor without just saying hoppy flavor.
Hoppy flavour. Hoppiness.
That's about as vague as you could possibly get. Yeah,
I think you
passion
nailed it.
fruit,
I think-
resiny maybe. Yeah, that's what I was probably trying to get at, rather than herbal, sort of maybe a resiny kind of note to it.
yeah, but it's like a touch of grassiness, I guess.
Grassy,
maybe.
yes,
Just
grassy,
a touch of
resiny
grass.
is what I was thinking.
Bang on. I think you're getting in this beer. You're getting sweaty mango, passion fruit, and a grassy note. It smells great. It's not punching. It looks like a mega thick hazy. First sip, I was like, oh, you know what? That's kind of tolerable. That's kind of gold top
Yeah.
territory. You know, like it's track gold top.
Just enough to smooth it out rather than make
Yeah.
it taste actually like milky, lactosey.
Yeah. The problem with milkshake IPAs, they just end up becoming too cloying. Too
Very-
thick,
very
too
quickly.
chilly, too cloying, too sweet. Drowns out the hops. It ends up nasty. One sip in, yeah, it's all right. Second sip in, oh, maybe that is going to be a bit too sweet.
Are you thinking you're struggling on the third sip? Because at that point, you might be in trouble.
I reckon it's walking the line, and it's just on the right side of it. But when I get to the last third, I'll give you an update as to whether I think it's too much.
Yeah.
But actually, it's not a bad beer. But don't let this specific beer guide you on what Beer Hut Brewing is all about. Actually had, I think I had 8 beers arrive. I've drunk 6 of them. Lots of different variety in terms of style. I think all of them have been really good. It's not going to blow you away. I'm not telling you it's the next Verdant, but pretty solid brewery, I'd say. Worth checking
Nice.
out. So they are based in on the east coast of Northern Ireland, I think. Sort of southeast. Near
Cool.
Donegal. If anyone wanted to know. Sure you probably didn't. Google it. Cool. So that's a commercial break done. We're going to talk a bit about survivable compounds, or this idea that actually got surfaced a few years ago from research from various hop growers about this idea of how compounds from hops can survive the brewing process and therefore present themselves in the end product.
Yeah.
The beer, namely the beer out the tap, and you drink it.
It's another one of like, how useful is this information really, and does it actually match up to, I guess, some of those kind of combinations that we've already talked about, or not, as the case may be. But yeah, carry on. What's the general concept?
I think essentially the concept is that there are certain varieties of hops that are going to present more. We're probably back to kind of oil content
Mm-hmm.
in the finished beer.
Yeah.
And there's some very interesting insights actually in some of this research, and we can chuck it up on the screen, or you guys can go and Google it. If you go to Yakima Chief's website, just search survivable compounds, and it's a really interesting way of beginning to think about certain hops that you're going to choose to use, particularly in the whirlpool,
Yeah.
not so much in the dry hop, but actually mostly hot side, late hot side, to give you as much hop expression as possible, whether that be aroma, predominantly aroma if you're using it in the, well, actually, tell a lie, predominantly flavour if you're using it in the whirlpool. So it's an interesting idea about how you start to construct some of your late hop additions into your recipes. I've certainly used it. There is some interesting hops in there that actually say that they carry more survivable compounds into the end beer, which is Idaho 7, I think, came up really high on that. There's also some other hops on the chart that you're like, oh, that's pretty interesting. Like there's maybe some like noble hops and kind of weird avant-garde hops that you might not necessarily be associating with really hop forward beer styles. I think Mosaic, Citra, and Simcoe tend to have very high survivables, which is no great surprise as to why they have become a popular.
They're all in the top half
source for hoppy East Coast or West Coast styles. Yeah, have you used it much, Rich?
I mean, I think I've definitely considered it in terms of like which are the hops that are going to actually bring value sort of through the boil, as opposed to just using them in whirlpool and so on. And you know, it's not something that I will go to for every recipe or whatever, but there's a few sort of, you know, standouts from the data where you go, oh wow, like I mean Centennial is the obvious one because it's basically the highest. And again, like this data is probably varies year on year, harvest to harvest and stuff like that, so it's not a definitive like this is always the case. But on the widely sort of circulated version of it, Centennial is the one that's like quite significantly at the top of the chart sort of thing. And definitely as far as like West Coast style beers and IPAs and things like that, I've always sort of thought, okay, well, I'm going to try and make sure I use Centennial, you know, in the earlier stages of the boil, and it seems to have been quite effective for that. And as you said, you know, the Citra and Mosaic are sort of givens that you can basically just use them whenever you want, and they're gonna have a good impact, which we kind of all knew anyway. But it's also sort of going, all right, well, look at the other end of the spectrum, and actually some of your hops like your Azacca and Amarillos and stuff are maybe gonna actually lose more of their flavor impact if you're using them earlier in the boil compared to some of those, so they might be more beneficial later on. So it's probably in terms of considering where I'm going to put the survivable hops, the ones with more survivables, I have considered it in some of my recipe designs, I think is fair to say. As far as what we're talking about, or what the sort of the you know, what the kind of headline of this podcast is as far as combining hops, which is one of the things they sort of say that you can potentially use this data for as well. I've not really used it in that sense as much. It's more been about just when it goes into the hop schedule, as opposed to which specific hops that I would be putting together. So I don't know. Have you ever looked at it? Because there is a bit of information on the booklet as far as like how you can also use it to choose which hops might go together, as far as basically picking stuff that's got contrasting, you know, oil content. Have you ever looked at that in that sort of level of detail at all, or you're muted at the moment, mate? You're muted, Owen.
No, I haven't, mate. No, I haven't really. But one of the things that's interesting, look at the data that I've got in front of me, which was posted in 2020, so it's pretty aged now, and this was
Yeah.
based on the 2019 harvest. You've got kind of cryo blend at the very top, which is an interesting.
That's worth actually mentioning because like there was quite a big fanfare over sort of cryo blend and cryo pop, and that being sort of like the nexus of the research for, kind of like they're sort of
Yeah.
like, okay, well, we're going to put all of this information together and go, what is the ultimate, sort of hop combination that's going to give you maximum survivables. And I tried a couple of commercial beers that were like sort of this is the cryo pop thing, and
Yeah.
to be honest, I was like,
Underwhelmed.
like
Yeah, underwhelmed.
that's really not that great. Um,
Yeah.
and I mean, did you
I'm not
try
sure
some
it
of those
took
beers
off.
as well
Yeah,
yourself?
I
Or
did. I remember. I
yeah,
remember trying a beer with cryo pop, and I think maybe breweries went a bit hardcore on the cryo and kind of forgot to also add in some not regular hops just to add some depth.
yeah,
And I think what ended up happening is you just get an awful lot of aroma. It's hard to describe really. You get a lot of top note hop character with no sort of foundation,
yeah.
and it kind of almost feels like it's lacking depth. It's
I
almost
know what you're
like
getting at.
it's a bit like I don't know. Yeah, it's a bit like go to a carnival and being enticed by the game and only to discover that it's it's a con. It kind of feels a bit like that.
I don't know whether this comes back to what we were saying about the sort of hop oil information more generally before, where it's like, okay, on paper, if you've got maximum levels of everything, it's going to be bigger and better and whatever, or whether actually that just kind of all almost cancels each other out in some sort of way. Because like for me with those cryo pop hops, and I used some myself in a beer, and it was just like I didn't really get much out. It almost felt like they were weirdly muted in a way.
Really? Yeah, that's kind of weird. Yeah, you wouldn't expect that, right? I
And
wonder if cryopop. Obviously,
I mean, they definitely haven't taken off like commercially, have they? Like you
No, I
don't
don't
really
think
see
they
them in
have.
any beers now
They,
at all.
they had a bit of a fanfare when they
Yeah.
kind of came out, and I don't think they've really survived. I think they've almost been sort of usurped by like liquid hot products and stuff like
Oh
that.
yeah, definitely.
For sure. And you do wonder if the cryo blends at that point were actually from Yukima Chief were driven from this survivable research, and you wonder if that
Yep.
blend was predominantly like Idaho 7 Mosaic Citra, Simcoe, for example.
I mean, you can see on the graph, it like looks like it was definitely a lot of Centennial in there, and probably a few of the other, top
Yeah,
hops
yeah,
there. But
for sure.
yeah,
There's some interesting things in there, like, as I mentioned, some odd ones like Millennium. I don't think I've ever used Millennium. Mount Hood, which is quite a famous American hop, which
Yep.
I've never used, up there. Equinox, which is a really interesting hop, actually, which I haven't used. I maybe used once or twice. Interesting, weird green pepper vibe
yeah.
of that, which can work in certain beers. So I think it's just another interesting means of being able to think about how you do start to blend your hops in. Idaho 7, great for adding like some tangerine orange vibes. Interesting mosaics, more survivable than Citra.
Yeah.
There's probably a hair between them.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that depends on what year the data's from, because I think they can swap around depending on which graph you're looking at as well. But
Yeah.
their general kind of theory in terms of blending hops based on this was to kind of look at it and go, okay, well, if you've got one hop that's mainly, geraniol, or one that's mainly linalool, pick one that's more of one than the other and add them together, and then you should have a more fuller flavor or more contrasting flavor or whatever, because you're getting a bit different. Whereas if they're very similar, it's not gonna be as exciting, for want of a better word. And like I said, I've never really sort of tried to put that into practice, to be honest, because like you don't sort of have this information that's up to date to hand anyway. So it seems like a bit of a, you know, you can't really use it really, to be honest. But like as far as the kind of information that they present on this graph anyway, if you look at the kind of combinations, you know, your Citra and Mosaic, as we've said, are very similar anyway in terms of their overall balance. So, you know, that sort of like kind of disproves the theory to an extent, as far as saying, well, they're just very complementary and they work really well and loads of people use them together. And then if you look at some of the other sort of classic combinations, I mean, I don't know, Simcoe and Amarillo, a little bit different, but not a huge amount. What other ones we got on there? Kind of like Citra and Azaka, maybe. So yeah, I mean, basically, I'm just probably going towards the point on this that I'm not sure it's that useful in terms of like making decisions on blending hops. A, because the information is not really available to you that easily, certainly not up to date information, and B, because I don't think just because they have different combinations of essential oils that makes it better to combine them because they're contrasting. I think there's just way more nuance and subtlety to it than just saying this one's got more of the yellow bar than that one, so therefore they'll blend together well.
Yeah, I think what's interesting actually for me is just looking at the hop oil content breakdown on the table of all the hops. Yeah, and you can kind of start to see how our point around the difference between your Mosaics and Citras versus your Azacas and Eldorados is just the total hop oil content. So yeah. Azacca's got like 198 total hop oil content versus, say, Mosaic, which is 679.
Yeah.
So you've effectively got like more than 3 times as much hop oil content in Mosaic as you have in Azacca. And it's kind of like, it doesn't necessarily make one hop better than the other, but it makes one hop.
But that's probably more useful, isn't it, as far as like blending?
I think so.
You can go, okay, well maybe if I want to actually get like some impression of what the Azacca is with Mosaic, I'm going to go 3-to-1 Azacca to Mosaic in terms of the ratio that you mix them together. So maybe rather than trying to sort of second guess what the actual flavor outcome is, that analytical data is more useful to go, okay, just on a potency level, if I'm going to blend them together, you know, I want both of them to be present flavor wise. So, and I think we probably intuitively know this a little bit already, that, you know, if you put like a shit ton of Mosaic into a beer and a little bit of Azacca or whatever other, you know, slightly less potent hop you might choose, you're probably not really going to notice much impact from that. But
no, you know, even 50-50, right?
Yeah,
because
it's going to overpower it.
One's 3 times more powerful than the other.
Yeah, exactly.
So that does get you thinking about hopping rates, and yeah, as you say, like it really depends on what you're hoping to achieve out of the beer. But if you want a balanced profile, you're going to be using 3 times as much Azacca as you are to Mosaic.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting.
Yeah, I think there's something there, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we're sort of probably at the point where we're heading for 2 hours. We've got 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Before we want to kind of end up wrapping up this podcast, so we've got a few things just to cover. One was around biotransformation focused blending, which is another layer of detail into this.
Yeah, that could be a whole podcast on its own.
Probably could, right? So what we're probably saying is again, what we've talked about is the survivables is there's another layer to say certain
Yeah.
hops have certain amount of thiols, therefore,
Hop companies are starting to present that information as well in their analytics,
mm,
interestingly. So
okay, that's
I'd
interesting. I've
noticed
not seen that before.
on Bathhouse, I saw the well, at least one of the varieties that we tried out last podcast had like precursor files measured in, and it's a very very small unit of mass that they're measuring in it. It's sort of
Yeah,
nanogram or something
a
like that. But
nanogram,
they
a
did have it.
nanogram
They
of
did have it on
thiols.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, and assuming that you can actually unlock those, because not all yeasts can, right?
Yeah.
It, I think that I think more broadly that the field of hop science and hop study is an evolving field. We're learning more and more about hops as the years go by, and it's a
Yep.
fascinating field, and probably one that we're going to continue to revisit over the years until we're aged. I'm sure every 2 weeks chatting about hops. Um, but I guess is there any reliable source of information to be able to see this sort of insight around thiol precursors and in hops, a bit like the survival charts? That might be one just to kind of go away and research. It's not one that we did research, but it's one to maybe begin to have a think about. Do we want to talk a bit about hop scheduling, hop dosage, and layering of hops?
Yeah. Yeah. I
That's
think
sort of-
so.
Because it's not necessarily just about the hops that you do choose, but also how you use them.
Yeah. When
So
we put them into the
It's not how big the hop is; it's about how you use it. So what are your thoughts around kind of early boil or bittering?
well, two schools of thought on this, I think, probably. So one is, if you're looking for bittering, you just want to go for the highest alpha possible with the cleanest kind of bitterness profile. And there's some, some varieties that are basically specifically there pretty much just to do that job. They're not really deployed at any other point
Yeah,
in
not
the
dual
boil.
purpose. Yeah,
Magnum's the obvious example.
yeah,
But you've got various similar hops. I think like Warrior and a few others. Predominantly I've always used Magnum myself if I'm looking
Yeah.
for a sort of dedicated bittering hop.
Columbus.
Columbus is again that's certainly one where I would say there's some use for it later in the boil, but a lot of people will use it as a
Bittering hop. Yeah,
bittering
hop
hop
side.
predominantly.
Yeah,
You could argue that maybe that's probably going to impart a bit more, potentially a bit more flavour,
I
even
think
if
it
it is
would.
used at the boil stage.
Yeah.
Similar for things like Chinook and Simcoe, which are also, initially I think sort of created with the intention of using them as bittering hops primarily, but obviously they can do a lot more as well. So yeah, the one sort of version of it is just to go as clean and as high alpha as possible. Obviously with the caveat that not just because it's a very high alpha hop doesn't necessarily mean it's going to give you clean bitterness. So, Galaxy and such, we're looking at you. Don't necessarily throw that in as a 60-minute edition because you might get some slightly upsetting results from that. But the other way to look at it is to go, okay, well, actually, lower alpha hops with a lot of volume can potentially contribute some flavors even if they are in the boil for 60 minutes. And I'm very much thinking in terms of traditional lagers and kind of European beers here.
Noble hops. Yeah.
Noble hops,
Sars.
but also English hops to an extent as well.
Yeah.
Because I think, a big dose of EKG or Fuggles at 60 minutes is probably going to give you a different outcome to 5 or 10 grams of Magnum, for example.
Yeah.
So I feel like, if you go by the sort of typical theory on it would be like, well, it's going to get all of the flavor boiled out of over 60 minutes, so it probably won't make any difference. But I don't buy into that. I think in my
I don't
experience,
either.
I feel like if you're, it's partly to do with just because of the actual quantity of hops that you've got to put in.
Yeah.
Um, you know, like I said, if you're using a sort of 3 or 4% alpha acid hop, you're probably going to be putting 40 to 50 grams in as a bittering charge potentially for a, I don't know, 30 IBU beer, right? And if that's in the boil for 60 minutes, yeah, obviously a lot of the volatiles are going to get boiled off, but I think you're going to get more just of that sort of general hoppy kind of herbal character out of it at the end.
And it's also about a quality of bitterness as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
In terms of I think coming back to that sort of Galaxy versus Magnum example as 2 ends of the spectrum, is Galaxy's going to give you a very spiky bitterness character that frankly is going to be quite unpleasant, versus Magnum, which is going to give you a very clean, pleasant bitterness.
Yep.
And then you've got everything in between. There
Yep.
are obviously hops that are better leaning towards bittering, predominantly I think because of the quality of the bitterness that it gives you in the end result. But I am also of the school of thought that you have to be thoughtful about what you do bitter with, because it does create character, and I
Yep.
think it creates what I like to think of as the foundation. It creates like a baseline
Mm-hmm.
in the beer, and that has to be thought about because that's what everything else is built on.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like
It's like the structure and foundation of the flavor, isn't it? In a way.
exactly
So
exactly that, and that is probably true of whatever you put hot side, pretty much right up to the point where you're at knockout going into whirlpool.
absolutely. I mean, I kind of have this opinion of how people talk about sort of hops throughout the boil, not just for the 60-minute edition, because it's very fashionable nowadays, especially with hazy beers and IPAs, to sort of go, well, there's literally no point in even putting anything in before you whirlpool. And I understand that to an extent, because obviously if you are doing, massively hopped hazy beers and IPAs, and you're throwing in, 10 plus grams per litre of hopping, there comes a point where you don't really have any choice in that, probably particularly on a commercial scale, just because of the amount of IBUs that you're going to generate through
Perceived
a whirlpool.
IBUs as well.
Where, when it's not the same as a homebrew whirlpool either, where it's like you can literally pull that out after 20 minutes and chill it down in 10, and then it's done and it's into the fermenter. That's maybe 45 minutes to an hour sitting at a higher temperature before it then, yada yada yada. But anyway, we've sort of talked about that when we've discussed whirlpooling and whatever with commercial brewers who have been on the pod. But what I'm getting at is, I think obviously, there's reasons for that sort of school of thought coming about with these sort of more extreme hazy beers. But for me personally, I think the actual concept of what used to be called hop bursting. Do you remember when people talked about hop bursting, and it was like
Yeah.
we're gonna put hops sort of through the boil. We're gonna go, okay, well, let's do a sort of half hour, 20-minute, 10-minute, 5-minute, and little drops of hops all the way through.
60-minute IPA.
Or you could take that to its extreme and do a every minute sort of thing. And some of the best beers that I've ever made, and some of the best recipes that I kind of go back to, they might not necessarily have like loads of hops through the boil, but they'll almost always have maybe a 30 or a 20-minute edition, then maybe a 10 or a 5-minute edition, and then maybe a whirlpool on top of it, rather than let's just do whatever we need for bittering or nothing at all, and then whirlpool and everything. And again, not to say that that's not a valid method or whatever, but I just think that the current thinking sort of steers everyone away from that, and I don't agree with that at all.
I think there's a UK East Coast style, and there is an East Coast style.
Yeah.
Where you've got the American East Coast style that actually does lean into quite a bit of IBU, but but really soft and lots of hop saturation. Then you've got the UK East Coast style, which lends to really low IBUs, lots of hop saturation. It depends what you like, really.
Yeah.
There is some interest. I've explored that whole kind of whirlpooling at 80 degrees,
Mm-hmm.
just to kind of, so you start, or even adding your hops at 100 degrees, and as you start to cool
Yeah,
it down,
bring it down. Yeah.
so you adding some IBUs just in that short few minutes, whilst the beer kind of cool. I think mine probably cools from 100 to 80 degrees in probably 2.5 minutes or something.
Yeah.
But that's normally enough just to kind of add a nice kind of hot profile. And of course,
Yeah.
what you're not going to do is end up boiling off loads of the hop character. But again, it depends what you're choosing to use, because it might be that you're choosing to use different hops in the whirlpool than you might do in the boil. There's some really interesting ideas around kind of adding different hops through the boil that you don't even use in the whirlpool or the dry hop. So Columbus is a great example,
Mm-hmm.
or like Challenger or Warrior or Bravo,
Yeah.
or Apollo or Laurel, or kind of any of those kind of dual use hops, to create some really, really interesting character profiles that I actually think can uplift what you add into the whirlpool and the dry hop in a way that can't be achieved through the whirlpool and the dry hop. So it's a very interesting dynamic thought that I'm even still interested to begin to experiment with over the coming years.
Again, I think it kind of comes back to this idea that there's so much nuance to it that is not quite covered when you just look at it on the purely, on paper concept of like, oh well, if you put this hop in during the boil, all of those volatiles are gone. Like,
Yeah.
Well, that's not the case, because we
Not
all
true.
know that you will get some flavour from it. But not only you will get some flavour, I think that's also kind of like, oh, well, yeah, you'll get a bit of flavour, but it's just going to be a diminished version of what it would be in the whirlpool. I think that's wrong as well. I think you get a different flavour from it, because maybe some volatiles are going and then survivals are staying in. So therefore, you're actually altering the balance of oils in the finished beer. So it's not just we're not looking for a singular Simcoe is Simcoe, or whatever variety it might be. It's like Simcoe at 10 minutes is going to be different to Simcoe at whirlpool, is going to be different to Simcoe at dry hop. And that's why using all of those tools together is probably going to give you a much more interesting and, layered hop flavour. And then when you start adding different varieties in and choosing them for specific reasons, and survivals might come into that, we're going to go, okay, well, Centennial is a banger if we put it in at 30 minutes to give us that base, resiny, piney kind of like, classic West Coast base, and then we put some Mosaic and Citra on top of it at whirlpool and dry hop, then we get a really nice sort of modern West Coast IPA hop profile or whatever it might be. So, yeah. That sounds like a good beer. Then
Yeah, I think you just came up with a good one. That was just purely out of your subconscious. That just spouted out.
It was lurking in there,
wisdom
in the depths somewhere.
So we've talked a lot about and wax lyrical about this idea of how you can start to layer in flavour through the boil, and actually not to fear that, even if it is quite small and deft. And actually the science behind the boil is like really quite complex. And we've talked about in the past about the number of different beers that you can create when you consider just the addition of hops. It almost gets to parallel universe level stuff, doesn't it? In terms of like what minutes you add, how much you add. Like, it gets pretty wild. We can talk about the whirlpool, but I think actually what we've probably talked to this enough around the survivable stuff. So that's probably where you need to start thinking about what you add into the whirlpool is really going to be about it's going in whilst it's warm, but you want something to continue to survive into the beer. And I think, interestingly, you and I both a big fan of the New Zealand Pilsner style. And I think that strongly leans into a whirlpool only
Yeah.
contribution.
Well,
actually.
I do dry hop with my recipes for that, but we're talking like, I mean, I've never gone beyond 60 grams in the dry hop, and sometimes it's been sort of 40 or even 30 grams. So it's,
Yeah,
by modern day standard, it's modest, to say the least. Yeah, that's still quite a bit for a lager, I guess, but it is a hoppy lager. But I've had the beer that you brewed without one, and we can say, even just by comparing the two, that like there's so much of that flavour that's coming from Boyle Editions and Whirlpool, as opposed to just putting loads in the dry hop, and a significant amount of flavour considering probably the total quantity of hops that are going in there. So yeah, and that, I imagine Nelson must have a significant amount of survivable compounds in it, based on that.
yeah.
It's not in that graph, but
I would imagine it's probably going to be punching up there with the Citra Mosaics, should it be in that
yes,
graph and in that analysis for sure.
for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, we got the dry hop, which I guess we haven't really talked too much about dry hopping. Um, Obviously, what that is aiming to achieve is really just to add as much aromatic punch to the beer as possible, right?
Yeah,
And we kind of taste with our smell to some, to a good degree. Um, I think there is really going to be about kind of how you're adding your sort of very high alpha acid, generally high alpha acid hops, that's going to sort of really add some interesting dynamic to the beer, isn't it? So your sort of classic styles are going to be sort of Citra, Galaxy, Nelson, all of that good stuff.
yeah. I mean, this is for me where you obviously, if you're looking for the dry hop to contribute to that nose on the beer, you do want to generally look for the hops that can have the most impact, just in terms of, if it smells massively aromatic out of the bag, then it's probably going to smell pretty aromatic when you throw it into the beer. And you look back at the survival charts, and it will sort of say, okay, well, some of these other hops are going to be more, they might be better utilized later, and that would include the dry hop. But as we said before, at the same time, they also have less overall oil and volatiles in them. So, you can still use them, but again, consider that you might have to put more of them in. And there may be issues that come along with that. So, if you have to sort of throw in 500 grams of Azaka in order to get the same impact from it in a dry hop, that might come with the unfortunate side effect of it then becoming a little bit green and grassy, because of the quantity of vegetal matter that's going in with those pellets. So that's I think that's probably one thing that doesn't quite sort of explain when you're talking about those survivals and things. It's like, really, the most important information there is like which hops are the most potent, because for dry hopping you probably want to get the best bang for your buck in terms of like potency versus quantity that you want to put in there, which is why we also have these liquid hop extracts that are becoming quite popular, because you can dodge some of those issues and the losses that you also get with throwing a lot of hops into the beer. More so on a commercial scale, but even so, I'd rather not be dry hopping with much more than 200 grams, to be honest, most of the time, hopped into a home brew, because you're going to struggle to transfer. You're going to lose quite a bit of beer in the process. I don't think I've ever really brewed a beer where I'm going beyond 300 to 400 grams of dry hop where it's not been pretty green, at least initially. and had to settle down a bit. So yeah, it's
That's experience and intuition telling you, what you can add and what you can't. And I think that you're right in terms of the liquid hop
yeah,
products have kind of brought a bit of a game changer there, which is great. There's lots of different options, and we could obviously probably talk about that for an hour. But we probably want to just wrap up with some sort of quick fire practical tips to really summarize everything we've talked about for the
yep,
last couple of hours. So I'll cover a couple, and then Tricky, you can cover a couple. So
sure,
in summary, sort of start out with just looking at the different online, resources around different hops, and go with kind of complementary hop profiles. So begin to think about how different flavors are going to contribute, like citrus and stone fruit, pine and tropical, berry and citrus. Those things are going to make kind of logical sense, and how you start to couple up hops, or even bring three or four together. So flavor charts are useful. That they are just guides, as we talked about. They're not definitives. They're going to give you broad brush ideas around what does fit, what doesn't. Watch out for dominating hops. We've talked about the flavor, uh, hop oil contributions from different hops, and how you might have to think about how that influences the amount of hops that you add depending on the outcome that you're looking for. So just be careful of certain dominating hops, in particular if you're going to use Galaxy and the Whirlpool, for example, or you're going to use Citra when you're using Azacca and Eldorado. Think about how that begins to come together depending on the outcome that you're looking for. I realised, Tricky, I said I'd cover a couple of points, and I've covered three.
yeah, you're not
Two.
leaving
So
me
I'll
much.
leave the last one with you, and then you can move on to the next bunch of points as well.
Yeah, cool. So I mean, we say this with all aspects of brewing, but as ever, keep notes on what you're doing. Obviously, if you're using software like Brewfather, then that's kind of been going to be done for you to an extent. But looking back at your previous brews and recipes, but also, trying to rebrew and do iterations on recipes. So, if you best way to sort of develop and improve on maybe those hop combinations that you're working on is to, if something's not quite right, try again, work on it, see what ratio does work for you. Maybe consider using alternative versions of those hop products and so on. And yeah, don't just try and sort of work off the basis of a given recipe, or what Chat GPT might tell you is going to work, or what we tell you is going to work. Everyone's systems are different, everyone's brewing process is different, everyone's ingredients are potentially going to be different to an extent. So like we've said a number of times, it's a moving target, right? So we can't provide a guaranteed sort of guide or method for success on this front, basically. So keep notes, make sure you refer to them, and use them again when you go back to beers, or do similar beers in that style. Essentially, is probably one of the best ways to learn and use that information again. Just as far as another practical tip, obviously we've got the obvious combinations. Is there a sort of combination of hops that's outside of those obvious ones that we've mentioned so far that you would have as a recommendation, Owen, at all, or anything you can think of? Putting you on the spot again.
Yeah, coming back to the hop that I couldn't remember earlier was cashmere.
Ah, yes.
As giving a bit of a like lemon and lime vibe.
Nice.
And actually, I searched it on the Beer Analytics website, so it actually gives some pairing options as well if you go and search
Okay, cool.
hops on there. So it actually says you can use cashmere hops, you can substitute it for Cascade. It pairs well with Citra, Mosaic and Cascade, and the flavours you're likely to get is berry, candy, citrus, coconut, fruity, grapefruit, grassy, herbal, lemon, lemongrass lime, melon, peach, spicy, stone fruit, strawberry. That's quite the range of flavours.
Sure is.
The thing is, though, is whilst all of those flavours have been reported to come from Kashmir, the odds are is you're going to get your bag of Kashmir, you're going to brew with it, and you're going to discover that it might give you berry, coconut, and herbal notes, and then you might buy it again in 2 years, and it gives you grapefruit, lemon, and lime. So that there is a bit of variation in there for sure. So that's pretty cool. I think coming back to your question, I think Kashmir and Idaho 7 is a great combo. I think Idaho 7 is one of those really high survivable hops. I think Idaho 7 punches really nicely. I think it's going to give you tangerine vibes. I think generally Kashmir gives you that lemon lime vibe, generally in my experience. And I think that's a really nice combination of two hops that you can take away. And Kashmir is one of those hops that has a lower oil content versus Idaho 7. So if you are going to use it, use 3 times as much Kashmir as you do Idaho 7. And then you're going to end up with a really interesting beer.
Nice.
That's my recommendation.
So I would go with 2 sort of variations on the, obviously we sort of go, everyone's doing Mosaic and Citra. So I'd say Citra is probably the hop that everyone is like most commonly combined with other stuff, right? And so on that sort of theme, a couple of alternative combinations that I would say are like absolute bangers for Citra. Another one that's fairly obvious but is still really great and worth mentioning is Citra and Nelson is like an absolute awesome combo. It just brings in that sort of really nice kind of grapey gooseberry, slightly more tart, brighter kind of Nelson flavor with the Citra that can be fantastic. And that can work in all sorts of beers as well. It's not necessarily just the sort of like hazies and stuff like that. Could be more of a sort of more modestly hopped kind of pale ale or golden ale or whatever. And another one would be Citra and Talus, which I thought I was thinking of that as something that I'd come up with, and then I realized actually the reason I'm thinking of that combination is because of Four Priests Brewery's beer, which is Murgy Straight, which is the combination he uses in that, but it works really well. And again, that's more of a kind of like lighter sort of APA sort of golden ale type beer, which is fantastic. But trying to do a not so subtle link there as well to an episode that might be coming up soon. So Andy from Four Priests even will be joining us at some point. I've forgotten what the date is, but he's going to come on the pod at some point. We may well talk a little bit more about that beer, but Citra and Talus are awesome. So yes, that would be two options I'd suggest there. So yeah,
amazing.
Should we wrap it up then on that point?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think I just on the point of future podcasts, we've kind of regrouped for the new year, really trying to focus on what are some of the guests that we want to talk to, what are some of the subjects we really want to get into, and we've got some good guests lined up so far. So we're going to be covering some stuff around smoked beers. We're going to be talking about Mix Firm. We're going to be talking a bit about cask. So just to kind of tease you a little bit in terms of what's going to be coming up in the next few months, which we're super excited about. So the next podcast is going to be coming at you on the 7th of February. So put that date in your diary, which is a Saturday. We're not fully confirmed on the subject we're going to be covering. It's possible we're going to have Andy from Four Priests, but yet to be confirmed. Otherwise, we may be thinking about doing another BJCP drink along. So watch out for our social posts. If that's the case, we'll push out something in terms of what BJCP style we're going to be covering. Make sure that you're prepped with the beers beforehand, so you can drink along with us, which will be a lot of fun, as it always is.
Awesome.
So, is that episode 132 in the bag?
Well, I think it might be.
Wow,
yeah.
amazing.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Hopefully you got some information out of that might be useful. And if you are still with us live, obviously you're more than welcome to come and join us on the afters. So Owen will be posting a link for that imminently in the chat. If you've never jumped on before, feel free to get involved. It's very informal, just basically a few people having a drink after the pod and having a chat. And then if anyone's got any questions to follow up on what we've discussed in the episode, then obviously that is a platform for you to do that directly with us. Equally, you can send us messages and stuff outside of that if you want to via Facebook or on YouTube now or wherever you might find us. So thanks everyone, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.
Adios.